Okay, we'll get started now. My name is Cindy Cornell. I'm the career coach for working professionals here at the Yale School of Management, and I'm delighted to spend a little bit of time with you today to talk about something that's pretty important if you're looking for a job. It's how to unpack a job description. So we'll dive right in here and say first things first. I'd like to make sure that you focus on our time together today. You can actually review this as a recording after the fact, though it's really useful if you actually give this your time and attention, because it's going to pay off when you do move to that next opportunity that you're thinking about in terms of making a job application and putting your very best foot forward. So invest this hour if you can for yourself. And if not fully today in this moment, then please check out the recording after the fact. Questions you can ask through the Q&A function. My colleague Kayla in the Alumni Relations Office is going to be helping me out with questions at the end to the extent that it might be difficult for me to keep up with the Q&A in the chat. If you do have questions, though, please do feel free to ask them. I'll address them more so at the end rather than through the presentation. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me with personal follow-up questions. You can make appointments with me through the alumni portal, through the career page, and you'll see just right there on the front page how to connect with me in coaching appointments. So today's agenda, at a high level, I want you to kind of really be open to what opportunities are out there and to let people know that you're there in really powerful ways. I talked about this a couple of months ago when we talked about clarifying your offer. You might recognize this this image because I'm kind of pulling it forward from that, just letting people know that you're here. And you do that in part because you're really clear, not just in what your offer is, but also in how you can actually solve the needs for the people that you're actually applying to work with. So we'll talk about some fundamentals in terms of unpacking job descriptions. And let me actually just say this up front, that oftentimes job descriptions are pretty poorly written by people who haven't actually done the work. So, so there's some opportunity for us to really get clarity about what those jobs are all about. We are going to move into a couple of elements of practice to give you an idea about how I kind of pull apart job descriptions and the types of questions that I ask, so that you might actually do the same in your own search. And then we'll get into a couple of wrap-up points and resources before we get into the Q&A. Hopefully we'll finish a couple minutes before the top of the hour, so that you can maybe take a couple of notes for follow-up for yourself and also get ready for whatever you have coming up next. I'm going to start with the end, and I'm going to lead off with a couple of takeaways. And hopefully this is going to help you to think about what we're going to talk about, and you can claim value for some of these points as we go through. Again, I talked about this knowing your offer. We talked about that a couple months ago in the clarifying your offer session, and what you're seeking, what you're looking to do. Opportunities, when you get really clear about those types of things, are going to surface sometimes themselves. And I want you to be curious. Relentless curiosity will serve you both as you're trying to figure out what you're doing and as you're trying to figure out what the company might need you to do. Sometimes we're going to read between the lines in the job descriptions. Oftentimes job descriptions are very high level and they don't get into the skills and the outcomes that are going to be really important for you to showcase in your stories. And it's really hard for us to kind of showcase those things if we haven't been thoughtful about what those stories might be that could be really attractive and really wonderful proof points for those employers that you could actually do this job really, really well. Trust, this is an important thing. Trust that if you don't know, you can find out. I had a conversation with somebody recently and they were certain of a question they wanted to ask because it was really important to whether they'd be, or how they'd be able to do their job and the types of things they would need to focus on. What was really interesting is that this person was convinced that the data, because they'd taken a look at the website, wasn't available. And I was thinking about it, it was actually a healthcare situation. And it was about incidents of infection after a certain type of surgery. And I was thinking that if I were in healthcare, if I were a hospital, I would probably want to control that information and own how it's reported. So it might not be on the very front page of the website, but it took me maybe 3 minutes to dig and I found it. So assume that if you don't see it right away, that it's findable, and keep looking, because there's a lot of information out there that people sometimes just pass right by and don't realize that they can get. And that's going to, again, help you to be really much more convincing and attractive when you do get into the interview with people. And when they read your resume to start, right? Because that comes before the interview. Look lots of different places. We're not just going to look at the job description and, you know, kind of tick things off. We're going to look around and figure out what else we can figure out. And resumes are marketing materials for them. So this is really important and a high level point. A confused mind will not buy. So this is sales 101. What do you have to offer? What are the outcome? What's the outcome that you're looking for? And what do they want? What are they looking for? And if you're wanting them to, for example, if you're sending over a request for an informational interview with somebody that you haven't met yet, what's the outcome? You're just looking for a meeting, or you're looking for them to say yes to your LinkedIn invitation so that you can actually engage in a different type of a dialogue. When you are sending across a job application, you're wanting somebody to enthusiastically read it. So what is it that you're not wanting them to kind of decide in that moment that you're the perfect person for the role. It's the start of a longer conversation. It's the start of a relationship. And it's really important to remember those steps. And if you're not sure what they need, if you haven't taken the time to really unpack and discern what the operational opportunities are in the organization, you're not going to put your best foot forward. And another piece that I'll kind of dive into and share, many of us kind of share everything we've ever done and say, oh, well, if we give it all to them, they'll figure out what's important. If you give it all to them in the Twitterverse that we live in right now, where people have very short attention spans, if the first couple of things don't resonate really loudly, they're not going to say yes. So this is important in terms of the quantity of information. It's also important in terms of the quality of information you share. You really want to share it in a way that people are going to say, oh, this is for me. This makes sense. I see how this person is going to actually fit into my organization and how they're going to actually create value. I'll give you another hint here is when you actually are in that space of knowing how you create value in the organization, it helps often when you get into the into the negotiation phase, when you get your offer, because you have a pretty good idea about what you'd be worth and how you're actually integrated with everyone else. And that's really useful data to have when you are in that space of negotiation. So just another hint why this research and unpacking is so valuable, because it'll come into play really well later. And even if you don't get this particular job, knowing how other organizations are set up when you move to the next opportunity is really valuable information as well from a competitive mindset. So know what they need and want and help to give it to them in ways that they're going to find it palatable. You're looking for a job. You're not looking for 1,000 jobs. You're looking for one job. And you need one seed. You get one shot to make a first impression. So this idea that some people have about having a resume and, oh, I've got it great, it's exactly what I want, it shows exactly what I think is important, isn't necessarily helpful, because that's your point of view about what might be important to you in terms of what you used to do, rear view mirror. This, again, I said earlier, it's a marketing tool for somebody else. And we have to actually be really clear that the seed that we're sending to them, if we're using this metaphor, is going to actually be the right seed for what they're trying to grow in their soil, in their environment. And certain seeds, those of you that have ever done any gardening or farming know that not everything grows in all soil. So different people, different seeds need different cultivation and bear different fruit. So one size fits all isn't going to fit everyone. So I want you to kind of really think about how you're spending your time. It takes a lot of time to send out a lot of resumes. It also takes a lot of time to be thoughtful about a resume and and unpacking a job description and having one that's very tailored to the organization, to that role. You're going to be more likely to get that call back. And I think that's a much better return than sending a whole bunch that aren't really well articulated, that aren't tailored. You're going to have a higher quality of conversation when you do get called back. So it's a reallocation. It takes time and effort regardless. It's a reallocation. of how you spend your time. And it's a bit more in the space of being thoughtful. So let me actually say one other thing here as we go to the next slide. We're looking for one bullseye. Be careful what you're looking for, right? Because if you shoot out all of these different these arrows, these different resumes out into the world, you're probably going to get a couple interviews. And what I find is that people get really excited when they get called for an interview. And a question that I often ask when people come to me for coaching and they say, "Hey, can you help me get this job?" is, "Do you want this job?" And I can't tell you how many people are really appreciative of getting that, of getting that question, because they're not necessarily sure that they do want the job. It's just something that they had applied to and they hadn't really been so thoughtful about it. It was available, so they went for it. So that's one thing that I want you to be thoughtful about, because if you're not clear up front about what you want, you might go farther down a path and get something that you aren't really happy about. And I do want you to be happy in the work that you choose to do next. Ready, aim, fire is where you want to go. Get ready, get set, go. You're going to shoot for some things that are very particular. So you might spend a little bit more time in terms of that upfront research about which of these targets am I going to shoot at. And folks that might have studied archery before or practiced archery before know that to shoot this many arrows, you're going to have some calluses. It's going to be uncomfortable. I'd rather you shoot really well one or two or three or four that that you're very focused about and you prepare well for, so that you actually you hit those targets. I talked about this a few minutes ago. The typical resume shares what you think is important. And I want you to not be typical. I want you to stand out from all the rest of the resumes that might get submit for an application. And we'll get a little bit more into how do we do that in just a moment. This is, kind of foundational and why we need to unpack these job descriptions. The typical resume shares what you think is important, what you've done, where you've done it. It's about that stage. It's about that playing field and those people. It's about what you're proud of. It's about what, kind of you needed to do and what you want and what you think they need. And there's not a lot of room for dialogue, and there's also not a lot of room for those individuals to participate in the story with you, because it's about someplace else. What's really super helpful is to translate it into what they need. So this is what we're trying to figure out in unpacking the job description. What do they care about? What specific problem do they have? What gap do they have in their organization that you're going to be able to bring your remarkable skills? And again, we're clear about what your skills are that you want to bring forward, because just because you have them doesn't mean you should or need to actually use all of them. You want to share which ones you do want to share. You want to get really clear about the types of outcomes that they are looking for that you would be excited to participate in and share. You're trying to figure out what risks they might see organizationally. You also want to start to think about what risks might they see in terms of how you might present, so that you can actually share your background in ways that mitigate those risks, where you bridge those gaps in ways that it overcomes an objection before they even bring it up. So it's important for you to kind of understand and step into their shoes and do as much research as you can about the company and about what they need. So I'm going to give you one more idea before we kind of dive into how to do that. You are not a one-trick wonder. You can take these ingredients and you can do lots of different things with them. And I want you to kind of be really clear about this translation piece, because if you don't actually translate, if you don't show them that you're going to actually take these same ingredients, these same skills, these same experiences, and you're going to put them together in some different proportions, you're going to actually come out with something that is differently delicious. So again, really think about the transferability, and we need to translate it into language that they understand, that's resonant to them. Again, this is an example I've given in prior webinars. When we talk about the word turnover in baking, it means something also delicious. If we talk about it in British companies, it means often revenue, whereas in domestic companies, US companies, it means people. So you want to be really thoughtful about even the vernacular, the lingo that you might have used in your old company, and make sure that you're using the language of the new company in ways that it's delicious to them when they read it on your resume and they want to learn more. So let's dive more into the job descriptions. Everything in a job description is required and non-negotiable. True or false? There's a couple of things here. Job descriptions outline all the skills and outcomes that are important to the role. And they're always really thoughtfully written. I gave you the answer to this one already. All of these are false, right? They're not always detailed. My job description, in fact, because of the way the Yale School of Management shares things, it included things that other people at my level across the organization do. I don't have anything to do with admissions, and I don't do much with academic affairs and student life. I'm a recipient of lots of their wonderful programming and things like that, but it's not part of my job on a regular basis. Those points were in my resume in my job description because other people at my level in the organization do them. If I had read them and said, oh, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this, it wouldn't have actually made a lot of sense. And in fact, what happened for me in my job description or I'm starting to speak too fast. This is something for you guys not to do in your interviews, is to speak so quickly that you get ahead of yourself. In an interview, it's going to be a little bit more calm and a dialogue. So let me slow down a little bit for myself as well in modeling this behavior. In my interview, I actually shared with my now boss that I was really excited about what I was reading. This is my first phone screen, about what I read in the first part of the job description. And I really, before we moved on, because we were getting ready for the second interview, to say, I need to clarify, because if some of these other things are part of my job, it's not the right job for me. And it was kind of funny because the first part of the job description was so well written. I don't know that she'd actually gone through and read everything else in great detail, because she assumed it was as awesome as the first part. And there were things in there about, like, financial aid reconciliations and reimbursements and other things, which I can do because I have an MBA in finance, but I don't want to do that stuff anymore. I want to coach. I want to support people. I want to do programming like this to help other people, kind of ascend into their own greatness, their own potential. I could do the numbers. I could do the math. That's not something that I wanted, though. It was in the job description. So I put this out also because I want you guys to know that not everything in there is required. And if we step back, as I did, and said, this doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense. If I'm doing these things and I'm doing these things, I'm not quite sure how I would be, kind of planning my time to do these other things also. And it seems like those could be more efficiently done by someone else. So it was by me asking the questions that I was able to surface that before I even came in and started doing the work. So think about these things and say, does this make sense? And really figure out, what would you be doing on any given day? So building on what I just said a minute ago, we don't want to send our resume out right away. We want to actually pause and do a little bit of research and be thoughtful about whether or not we want to even apply to a job. So the best thing to do as soon as you see a job description that sounds good is to apply, run as fast as you can. False. Please take your time, do a little bit of research, make sure it's something that you really want. And another thing that's really important, especially in this environment, is for you to see if maybe you can network in there. Because when you have somebody on the inside that you can both ask thoughtful questions of to get clarity around some of the elements of the role and its impact and how it integrates with other functions and other people, and also that could actually take your resume down, your application down, and refer you in, that's gold. So this network piece is really important also. So again, I'll refer you back to some of our prior webinars where we talked about networking in the age of social distancing. And I really would suggest that for almost any job, any company out there, you're one or two people away from somebody who actually knows someone and can help you out in that role. And it doesn't always even have to be somebody who's in the role or who's in the company. It could be somebody who works in maybe a competitive company in a similar role, or it could be somebody who used to work in the company. So again, lots of different places to get really valuable information about the organization, the challenges that they're facing, and what it's like to work there. So take your time there and look for evidence about what they're going to care about. So a couple of more true false plays here. A reader will take the time to interpret and understand everything you've done and figure out if it makes sense. False. They're going to go fast and they're going to say, oh, this makes sense. This doesn't make sense. Again, think about a job right now. If we look at LinkedIn, sometimes we see 100 people applying to a job or 1,000 people applying to a job. You need to do something different, distinctive, that actually gets your resume, gets your application to rise to the top. So they're not necessarily going to take the time, if it doesn't click right away, for you to actually to make the cut and come in for an interview. If you include everything you've ever done, this is false also. The interview is going to pick and choose. They're not going to. Again, it needs to be relevant and resonant and succinct and catching their eye in a way that they say, I want more of this. I want to learn more here. It is important to capture the reader's attention quickly and keep it by sharing relevant evidence of your prior experience and success through resonant stories and language. That one's true. So, when you make notes for yourself today, maybe write that one down and remind yourself and say, as you're getting ready to send a resume through, if I put myself in their shoes, is this something that I'd be excited to read? Is this someone that I would be excited to say hello to? And you can't do it and say, well, I'm a great person. You just really have to do it from their point of view because they don't know you yet. So what have you put out there that's a really tantalizing appetizer that's going to help them to understand that you are worth knowing? One step at a time. Please know where you are in the process. This is a relationship, and the best relationships evolve over time, and we build mutual rapport and respect. And it's sometimes helpful for you also to kind of pause and say, where am I in my career? And what do I want to do? And what do I want to do in 5 years or 10 years? Because that's a question you sometimes get in interviews, right? And think about, what skills are you excited to bring forward? And what skills might you be excited to learn? Because that's going to help you to figure out in this job, as you're understanding what the role is about, the job description, if in fact you're going to be able to do those things that are going to make a difference for you in the future. Your application is going to be a piece of a longer process. I talked to somebody recently who, actually more than one person, in fact, who was coming with a scarcity mindset to an application. And, let me share everything that I've ever done. Great, I got the interview. Let me now speak as fast as I possibly can to tell them everything that I possibly can, because this could be the only meeting. If you stop and you think about that and you look at this visual one step at a time, you're assuming that I'm going to get to this step and that's as far as I'm ever going to get. I need you to be thinking about getting to the top of the staircase and thinking about one step at a time. So the informational interview is a step, and the introduction to somebody else is a step, and the reviewing the job description and asking some clarifying questions of somebody that you've networked into is a step, and sending the thoughtful application and the cover letter is a step, and then the interview is a step. And know where you are in the process and what level of rapport and trust exists, and kind of understand where the other people are in the process too. So I think I've done this sometimes. I was doing it even earlier in the session today. I was going too fast. Has anyone ever tripped up steps? So I don't want you to trip. I want you to be able to do this really, kind of gracefully and confidently, because if you're not confident, that's you're shooting yourself in the foot there too. So having done this self inventory and understanding what value you bring to the role in ways that they're going to find exciting is going to help you to share it in ways that they're going to engage with you and in a dialogue. So again, that back and forth and the rapport building is super important. And do I feel closer with this person now than I did at the beginning? So This is another one I want you to kind of think about, and we're kind of finishing up with kind of the fundamentals, is in knowing where you are, you don't want to go so fast. You don't necessarily want the job offer in the first interview. Believing that this is the perfect job and you're the perfect person and this is the perfect role for you and your life is going to be amazing once you have this job is actually not doing you or the company a service. Uh, it's kind of like showing up on a first date with a ring and you haven't actually gotten to know the person yet. That actually, I didn't have I had the proposal on a first date once, not the ring, but that was really awkward. And there was no second date because I was really clear that the person didn't know me, didn't care to know me. They were just kind of like, it was very superficial. And like I said, there was no rapport and trust built, and there was no second conversation. So please don't show up assuming that there's only this one meeting. You need to actually plan on it being a longer term relationship. Um, Another way of thinking about it is when we put ourselves out there and we try to tell people that we're perfect for them and we haven't actually really figured out what they care about, that's kind of like seduction. It's a little slimy, it's a little sleazy. Let me tell you why I'm great, versus this idea of attraction, where we're trying to figure out in what ways are we well matched and how do we actually find that find those places where when in coming together we can actually do really amazing things. So think about that attraction versus seduction, where you play as big a role in figuring out if they're the right match for you as they do in evaluating your candidacy. You'll be a lot happier in your career if you approach things from that perspective, and you're going to find much better relationships. So let's move into some practice here. This is a line right out of a job description. You will provide team leadership as well as strong relationships in complex environments, clarifying business issues and recommending solutions to drive business value and benefits realization. I have no idea what that means. I'll be leading. Okay, great. So we'll start there. Who's the team? What is the team responsible for? With whom will I be building strong relationships? And in what ways is the environment complex? Each of these points, you could actually share a lot of different, or research and understand a lot of different things about the company, about the industry. We don't even know what industry this is or what company this is. It was from a real job description. I've forgotten now which one it was. Benefits realization. Benefits to who? As measured how? How are we measuring the business value as well? What does the business value look like? Is it value extrinsically? Is it value internally? I'm not sure. What business issues? So you can see by just looking at this, right? The person who might see the job description and say, oh, yep, I can do that, is going to have a very different resume than the person that actually is saying, I've actually led cross-functional teams in really complicated environments. It maybe isn't the same company, the same industry, the same style of work. The skills, though, and the outcomes are transferable, right? These are leadership skills. And my underlying understanding of the business issues, if I can articulate that clearly through a couple of well-planted stories, is going to have them leaning in and saying, wow, I want to talk to this person. I want to kind of, stress test some of these stories. Those ideas around what do you want to share and how are they going to realize them? How are they going to hear about them and say, oh my gosh, I need that. Let me bring this person in. That's going to make a difference. And that's going to differentiate you from the rest of the resumes who are sending out their one size fits all. You're actually putting out some words, maybe even calling some of the words that they've used in their own description, and you're giving them back to them in ways that they understand. Let's continue. Use in-depth skills and business knowledge aligned to do business objectives, processes, measurements, and tools to analyze issues, formulate hypotheses, and test conclusions to determine appropriate solutions. This is the second line of that same job description. And again, it doesn't say a whole lot. We have to really unpack it and think about, what does this look like on any given Thursday afternoon? What would I be doing? Which skills am I using? Which business knowledge am I bringing forward? where did I receive this business knowledge? Is it business knowledge I'm taking in through the news? Is it business knowledge from my industry expertise? Is it, kind of where it might come from a bunch of different places. So what types of business knowledge do I want to demonstrate to them that I have and or have the ability to learn and become also expert in a way that I can actually align with business objectives? Do we even understand what the business objectives are? This may not be something that's actually so explicit in the job description or even on the company website. It might be, a business unit in a part of a larger organization. So I'd want you to be really thoughtful in having unpacked not just this job description, but doing your research around what you can find out in the 10Ks and other reporting, conference calls if it's a public company, or on their LinkedIn page. I had a conversation one day with someone who was going to a company who had just on their LinkedIn page done a profile of the plant that this person was going to go and interview in. And this person hadn't either followed them on LinkedIn. So that's a kind of a bad mark for you right off the bat. If 100 resumes are applied to a job and they're trying to figure out which ones to read first, the recruiters can see if you followed the company or if you don't. So I'd rather be in the group that follows, that get looked at first, than the group that doesn't. So follow the companies you're interested in on LinkedIn and other places as well, Twitter, Instagram, wherever they might have a presence, and read what they're posting and look at the videos they have and things like that. This person actually wound up reading this interview or reading this article that I had brought to their attention and meeting two of the people who were actually profiled. And, that made a difference in his interview, that he was actually prepared. So, there's lots of information in lots of different places. And he was able to then ask questions specific to what they'd quoted around business objectives, for example, in this case. So if you don't have that, if you're not so lucky to find an article that's so specific to the job and the company and the plant that you're looking to join, the location, you might ask the question, right? I understand organizationally at the highest level, the objectives are these, and things that you're known for are these. What's specifically important to our organization, to this function? That was an assumptive close, by the way, we. When you use that language in communicating with people, it gives them a flavor and a sense of what it's like for you to be in working relationship with them. So think about how you can weave that into your presentation when you're telling stories and explaining things to them. So I'm going to step back away from this this example, and we'll move on and talk about where else we can look for information. But I think I've given you some ways to start looking at and unpacking and listing out things, analyzing issues, formulating hypotheses. What are examples where you've done that really powerfully in the past, and using, for example, the situation action results framework? How do you actually share with people how you've done that well in a way that they're going to be excited that you can do that for them? Look beyond the obvious. Where else? I mentioned to you that a little bit of digging and believing that information is out there usually helps you to find it. And if you can't find it and you've networked well with people in the industry, it might be that somebody else can help you with that information. If you don't have the information, I mentioned this before, specifically for the company that you're interviewing into, you could actually think about competitors. If you have contacts within the company, but not within the department or the division, there's still opportunity to understand a little bit more about the organization and how the different parts of the organization work with one another. Most of us on this call are not going into our first jobs. So we are ascending in our leadership, and understanding the cross-functionality, understanding how the different groups come together is really important. And you can learn things and share. I understand this from this person over here. I understand this from this person over here. Can you help me to understand, what that looks like in this department? Again, thinking about the role, what do they care about? You want a clear understanding. What would be useful to them? What skills do they value? What are the interdependencies? This might not be listed. With whom will you be working? What cross-functional organizations are important to your success? What do you want to know about those cross-functional organizations? You're probably going to interview, if you move ahead to that place, to speak with some of the heads of those organizations, or at least the people that you'd be reporting to or working with, right, rather, on a regular basis. They might want to have a say in whether you're the right candidate as well. So you want to kind of understand what they care about and think about what might be on their dashboard and how are they measured? How is their success measured? And in what ways, again, would you be able to contribute to them in ways that you're helping them to do their job better? So you're building rapport with them even before you start working. You have to be curious about this though, because that's probably not going to be explicitly written in your job description. Hoping this is giving you guys some ways to think about things. And it's also showing you it's not as simple as finding the job description and reordering. This is another thing I hear all the time. I've reordered my resume bullet points to put the most important things first. That's not enough to stand out in really compelling ways. You might also be curious about, again, thinking beyond the obvious, who was in the role last? Or if this is a new role, why was it created? What benefits are being sought? And what would success look like? In what ways are you going to be measured? That may and often is not listed in the job description. So a lot of different things you can actually look at here, including if it is an existing role, what were some of the significant challenges that others in the role have experienced? And also, what were some of the things that they did that really made them successful in the role? Would be things that you'd also want to know, because you would potentially be able to know what you want to continue in the role and bring forward, and also to know what you want to think about differently and leave behind. So making it real, you might not yet have, you might just be thinking about a job, a change. Start with your own job in terms of understanding and writing what would be a great job description for your job. What requirements are there? What skills, what outcomes, what experience? Let me speak to this as well, because this is also very important. Sometimes a job says that certain experience, certain number of years, certain prior roles are required. That is sometimes a hard stop. It's sometimes an absolute requirement you won't be considered if you don't have. More often than not, though, that's a proxy. They believe that somebody with that role, that experience, that type of credential likely knows what they need to know to be successful in the role. So if you have acquired that wisdom and knowledge and experience by other means, by non-traditional means, please don't let that hold you back from applying to the job. Rather, you're looking at that as an objection that you want to overcome quickly. You want to put that right up in front so that they say, this is a different kind of a person, and I'm not going to say no. I'm going to be curious about this, and it gets you in the door. So you want to think about what could those objections be, and not to look at that experience criteria as being a go or no go. This is also important as you might be a more experienced person shifting into another kind of a role. If you are in a different function, I never ever want you to think about having to go all the way back down to the bottom, to the beginning, because you're starting something new. You bring so much wisdom about business and relationships and experiences. I talked to somebody yesterday who has worked in kind of social impact and mission-driven companies for their entire career. And it was really cool to spend some time and figure out what was the thread that went all the way through all of those different jobs, because even though they were in very different industries, focusing on very different missions, the thread and the legacy and the impact that this person had in those organizations was very consistent in powerful ways that other organizations might be excited to see. And this person had, achieved the pinnacle role. They were the top of their organizations. And they're looking to say, hey, you know what, I'd like to actually move into a lower level role in a bigger organization. There needs to be some compelling reasons for that, right? There's more for me to learn. There's more mentoring that might happen. There's specific things you want to grow in. So you want to actually think about that and overcoming objections. Why would you want this role if you've already done this? Sticking with this slide though, and stepping away from that particular example, why does the role exist? Again, this is super important. If you figure out in your research, why does this role exist? Who does it interact with? If it's a supply chain organization, how does it create value? When you get to the place of negotiating a little later, you're going to have really valuable information to articulate why you think you deserve something different perhaps than what they've offered, because you're going to talk about how you're going to create more value, more efficient value, those types of things is really important. And another piece is that they can't actually pay you more than the value that you create. So this is something that's important too, in terms of figuring out if it's the right level role. If you do bring so much more experience than the role it creates value, that might be a mismatch. So these are, some different ways of looking at whether something is right for you. There also might be things that are missing in the job description. So this might be a list of questions that you put out as you've reviewed the job description, where you're then able to go in and do the research and ask a bunch of people. When you've done this work, I promise you, the quality of the resume is going to be so much different when you read it from that point of view of the recruiter, of the job hiring manager. They're going to actually, kind of see you in their organization if you've done it well. And that's a different topic about how to translate your prior experience into bullet points that really resonate. And we've talked about some of those things in prior webinars, but the storytelling and, kind of catching their attention and knowing what they're going to say yes to, that's another powerful skill. The next step, you have to figure out what makes them tick first. And that's what this is all about. So let me give you another example here. A tale of two resumes, a tale of two roles. If you were someone who is an experienced financial person who's sending out the same resume to everyone, and you take a peek at these two roles, there's very different things, words that are in the two roles around planning, around modeling, around industry function versus transformation and improvement. So while you might be able to do both, the story, the conversation, let's go to that. The conversation, the dialogue you would want to have with somebody in an interview would be very different in one role versus the next. So again, please think about, is one more technical? Are there more technical stories required? Is one more regimented? Is one more creative? Is one more independent? This is going to actually help you to tailor your resume. And I'm not saying that the same person couldn't do both of these things. One, do you want to? And two, how you present yourself to be considered for the opportunity is going to be very different. Show them, don't tell them. Seasoned executive, I see this all the time in LinkedIn, responsible for leading the sales organization to achieve aggressive targets by launching new products into existing and new channels. Whenever I see responsible for, I pause, because I don't know if you did it well or if you screwed it up. Just because you're responsible for it doesn't mean you actually followed through. And I want you to think about, if you were to tell people in terms of story, again, you can go back into, and there's frameworks that you can look at in the career resources. And I believe that Kayla has already shared in the chat box the link for those recorded webinars and other career resources. In general career support, there are a number of resources around resumes, around cover letter, kind of structure, around an SOM template for working professionals for resumes, and around how to tell stories, or how to, kind of put out things in the situation, action result framework. Those are all available to you. You want to think about showing them. So what could that look like? Thinking again about what experience is important to them, how big and how complex, how things grew, et cetera. There's lots of different things in here you could talk about in terms of relationship management and, kind of what happened. My example that I give people often in my LinkedIn, headline, I don't say that I'm the career coach for working professionals at the Yale School of Management, which I could say. I say that I help successful leaders, so I'm clear about who, to get out of their own way, right? Even though we're successful, sometimes we have challenges, so that we can have the impact in the world that we're meant to. Again, I hang out with you guys, and this is all about, kind of educating leaders for business and society. So what is the impact you're seeking to have in the world? And how can I help you to actually figure that out if you don't know it, and or overcome some barriers or obstacles you have to actually having that impact? That's where I love to play. And that's my headline. So you can actually see the difference between telling people what I do and giving them some language that helps them to figure out if I might be the person they want to talk to. So those are just a couple of examples there. Coming into the end, I want you to be present to the opportunity. As you're getting ready to go into any of your job interviews, let's assume that you've actually unpacked the job description, you've sent your resume in, or if, for example, if by chance you've sent a couple of resumes in that were kind of the one size fits all, and you're going into, you've gotten a couple of interviews, before you go in there, think about, again, all of what we've talked about today. What do they care about? Really unpacking it, thinking about what does any given afternoon look like? I had a conversation with somebody recently that had a really big job description, and there were a bunch of different component parts to the job description. And what was really interesting about it was when I stepped back, I'm like, I'm not quite sure how one person can do all of those things in the way that you're describing they need to be done. So we spent some time in thinking about, kind of timing and action and allocation of focus across these different responsibilities. And it, one, helped this individual to understand that it maybe wasn't the job that they were looking for unless they had some serious help in a couple of these areas. And on the other side, it really helped them to ask some really smart questions when they got into the interviews to understand how they were going to be measured and challenged again, and evaluated against these different things, so that they knew what was most important to the role when they got there. If you're ready to go in there and you're thinking about these questions that you might have, you might actually be thoughtful about the stories that you want to share that they're going to find as really useful to demonstrate your capability, and also the things that you're uncertain about, so that you can ask them really thoughtful questions and they're stepping back and saying, wow, this person understands this role, even it seems like better than we do. And that's where that's winning in this game. Bringing you back to the key takeaways that I shared at the beginning, and I'm hopeful that these all came out for you and they made some sense. This idea of relentless curiosity, I can't emphasize this enough. So important for you to be really thoughtful about both what you want and also about what they want and need. And also being clear about the distinction between what they need and what they say they want, because those might be different things. And you can't necessarily sell them what they need right away. That might take a little bit more, a few more conversations, or it might be something that you have to actually work up to once you're in the job. Read between the lines, keep looking and learning, and even through the job interview process, keep doing your research, keep looking at what's being posted in the news, in the media, what's happening in competitive organizations. You can, in the next conversation, be even more in tune, and they can see that, wow, you really are aware of what's important in our organization, in our industry, what makes things tick. Your resume is marketing materials for them. It's hard to tailor it if you haven't done this work, this kind of customer research work, to know what they're all about. In terms of resources, again, Kayla has already shared the link for some career resources. There's resumes and cover letters already in the career resources that you can check out. Lots of prior webinars, and also there's a really great, I didn't share it today in my dialogue, but I'll share it now. There's a really great LinkedIn course that I've talked about in other courses that's also in the SOM resources, and there's a link there to get that. With compliments of SOM, land the perfect job with LinkedIn. Really remarkable suggestions in there about how to use the tool for research both from a perspective of networking with people who have gone to Yale SOM or perhaps where you went undergrad, and also about how recruiters use it, how the AI works, and things you might do in your profile to raise your profile in the eyes of the people who are evaluating both your LinkedIn profile as well as your applications. So we've covered a whole lot today. Hopefully this has given you some new ways to think about your job search. We've got about, what do I see, 9 or 10 minutes to go through some questions. And I am excited to do that. One question that came in earlier and I wanted to address in a little bit more, I spoke to it a little bit, is as a seasoned professional, how do we know if it's the right level role for us? And again, when the job descriptions aren't well written, it's sometimes not going to be necessarily apparent with respect to that particular job, that role. If you're just looking at the job description, though, there's lots of nuances and hints that might be available to you in terms of figuring it out. If there's anything about leveling, you might not know what the levels are in one company versus the next in terms of salary banding and things like that. You might be able to figure that out. Or if you know somebody, even if it's your roommates, brothers, cousins, you can actually kind of reach out to that person and say, hey, you work there. What does this level mean? And people generally are happy to help if you ask the right question. And that might help you to know, is this, kind of like a lower level manager, or is this a more senior role with opportunity to grow? So different places that you can look for that kind of information. I'd also suggest that the other things to do would be to look at other job descriptions within the company. They could be different roles, they could be different divisions, they could be adjacent functions. You can get a pretty good idea about where a job sits in an organization when you start to see what's in and around it. And that can be useful as well in terms of also understanding how companies speak and the value, especially as we ascend in leadership and we're working more cross-functionally across lots of organizations. It's not going to be information that's wasted. I think all of this information, as you're looking into it for any job, is going to make you a smarter and more savvy job seeker, as well as this more savvy business person. So hopefully that begins to answer. I just, again, keep asking questions. And if you're not totally sure, again, this idea of unpacking it and thinking about what it might look like on any given day, if you're not the right person, if you're too senior, you might be able to reach out to somebody and find out, what they are, where they are looking for opportunity, or just to let them know that you've really enjoyed, doing the research on the company. And while this might be a lower level opportunity, you hope you might keep in touch, because there could be further opportunities in the future. And a lot of recruiters do like to keep in touch with people. And I shared this, I think, in the hidden job market webinar earlier. Oftentimes, by the time a job posting gets to LinkedIn, it's gone through, the initial hiring managers thought about their network and who could be a good opportunity, a good role for that. The internal recruiters thought about their network and who could be a good match. So it's gone through a couple of iterations. So if you make a really good relationship with a recruiter and they like you, they're probably going to remember you in the future or recommend you for something else, even if it's another company. So relationships matter. And I say this often, and it bears repeating here as well. Our careers are long, and it's a good investment to be nice to people. So hopefully that answers that question a little bit more around how we can actually figure out if it's the right role for us. If you get in there and you're interviewing and you figure out, whoa, this is actually a really lower level role, it could be that there's a couple of skills there that you might, kind of take on to do for a year if you can afford what the compensation might be. But if not, like I said, it's okay to say this doesn't seem like it's the right fit, and I'd love to keep in touch in case something else opens up. People generally appreciate that forthrightness. So let's see, what else do we have here in terms of questions? Would tailoring a cover letter instead of tailoring a CV be enough? No. In some cases, cover letters don't even travel with the resume. So I really want you guys to think about your resume being a standalone document. I know in some application systems, if you send the cover letter in first and the resume in second, they're only going to get the first page. So being succinct, sharing relevant, not professional, not all, but seriously relevant information is so important. And making sure that that resume can really stand alone. I know that when I was in line functions, I had a long career in accounting and finance and operations before becoming a coach. I would sometimes get resumes from HR as they were handing the person off to me. And I wouldn't have had a chance to even look at the cover letter if I wanted to. I was basically scanning the resume as I was going through the interview. So cover letter by itself isn't enough. And the other thing about cover letters, those are kind of the stories that you want to be telling in the interview. And if you're telling it in the cover letter, you miss the opportunity of expanding on it and really having the person that you're talking with participate in the story with you in the interview process. So assume if your cover letter is there, again, it's intended to, in terms of the steps we talked about, it's intended to get them to want to read the resume, not intended to replace the resume. So if you can create some context about why, especially if you're a non-traditional candidate, that they should look at you and be curious about you, that's what's in the cover letter. And it's brief because, again, we're very, we don't take a lot of time to make these decisions. There's a lot of research that talks about it's fewer than 10 seconds. In some cases by a lot, if somebody looks at something and decides they want to spend more time with you. So each one is a small step in increasing a person's investment in spending time with you and getting to know you. So cover letter doesn't actually work to tailor only. You do certainly want to make sure that that resume stands alone and is intriguing in and of itself. Are there templates about the cover letter? Again, I think Kayla has, and resume templates. Kayla shared the SOM internal links and the resources on the alumni page on the SOM alumni portal. These are really, and I'll say this, somebody actually has asked if they can share these resources with their families, with their kids. These are career management skills that I would hope that you use over and over and over again. And you think about them not just when you're looking for a job, but throughout your career. And you're in a very different space. And it's really quite cool that opportunities come to you if you're networking with people, if they know what you're interested in. So you're not going to necessarily be having to go find the job opportunities. And instead of actually you shooting out the arrows or you blowing the dandelion to spread the seeds, the opportunities are coming to you and you get to evaluate them from that perspective. So if you do this work, cool opportunities will come to you. You still unpack the job description though when you get it and do all of this work. I've heard that some job descriptions are written with the candidate already lined up and pre-selected. Sometimes it is, right? Sometimes an internal company, they might know who their person is, and it's a little bit like a dog and pony show where they're bringing other people in. Please don't, if you're showing up to that saying, this is the perfect job, I'm so excited for it, I'm the candidate, and you find out that that there's another internal candidate and you were the foil for that so they could compare that person to someone, it's still really valuable experience. And that person may or may not really be successful in the role. And something else even better might open up. So still show up, still do the research, still keep in touch with people. And, as I said, our careers are long. People move all the time. So the recruiter that you interviewed with that really liked you, that couldn't hire you because there was this other person already lined up, when they move to their next company, you might be their first call as they're looking for their next opportunity. So I'm hopeful that helps you to show up to all opportunities, recognizing if it's not this one, it's getting me closer to the right one. And that mindset is super important too. I'm conscious of our time. I see that there's, I think, one more question. Let me see if I can actually look at this. In a situation where they're trying to create a job for you and you're excited about it, here's a place where I'd say you want to know what your boundaries are. You want to know, again, what you want. And when organizations are trying to create something for you, dive ahead and as I was talking about, start with your own job description, write your own. If you're thinking about what might come next for you in the evolution of your own career, think about what would that amazing job opportunity be? What would it look like that would fall from the sky into your lap? Write that job description out. And it's also really important to be really clear about what you do want to do and also what you don't want to do, because I want to make sure that there's a lot more of what you do love than what you don't love. Because when you're thinking about balance and health and family, I want to make sure that when you leave your job, you are enthusiastic and happy and excited and you feel really great about what you did and you have the best parts of yourselves also to give back to your family, because that's really what's most important, right? Um, Hopefully that answered that question. I know I did it pretty quickly. Kayla, can you tell me did I miss anything? Are there any others?
No, I think that's it.
Groovy, awesome. So I'm sorry, we went a couple minutes over, and I do want to thank everybody for being here. If there's something that we missed that you want to talk about in more detail, please, if you're an SOM alum, make an appointment with me through the career portal. And I look forward to seeing you all next month when we have another career conversation on a Thursday afternoon, another webinar. And I'm cheering you all on. Hiring is happening. I'm having lots of conversations with people about negotiating. So if you haven't found your right opportunity yet, please don't give up, because they're out there and it's coming for you too. Thanks again for being here. And I look forward to talking with you again soon.